Hi, I'm Chris, aka The Philosopher's Games, and this is part 4 of my Who is Elrond lore and character study video. We are still at the beginning of the Third Age. Keep in mind, this video works as standalone video as well, and you don't need to see the other parts, though I would recommend checking them out. When I'm done, there will be an all-in-one version as well. As always, I try to pronounce names as Tolkien described it, which means you have to embrace the trilled R. Shoutouts to all the artists who allowed me to use their fantastic artworks: Kimberly80, Ted Nasmith, Sara Morello, Jenny Dolphin, and all the others. Links are in the description, and spoiler warning. Elrond as vice-regent and considering his elven ancestors had most likely the option to claim the title of High King of the Noldor Elves, becoming Gil-galad's successor, but he never did. I assume he thought it never ended well with the kings of the Noldor clan, and they also started leaving Middle-earth, so there was less need for a new king. One could argue Galadriel maybe could have also tried to make a claim, though that would have been unprecedented for women, but she did not try either. Círdan became Lord of the Grey Havens. Elrond remained Lord of Imladris, which is the Sindari name for Rivendell. Galadriel and Celeborn ruled at some point over Lothlorien. Amros was still there too. And Thranduil over the Woodland realm. With this, those realms had good and powerful leaders, and things worked out without a High King of the Noldor. It seems Elrond also met Celebrian, Galadriel's and Celeborn's daughter again, because she and Elrond married Third Age 109. We don't have any details about this except for the year and that it happened. When he met Celebrian for the first time, I said it was probably not the time for romance back in the day after the War of Elves and Sauron, but now after Sauron's defeat through the last alliance in a time of peace, this changed as we see. Elrond for sure had to speak to Celeborn and Galadriel to marry their daughter. The details of that are not recorded. Valandil, Isildur's only surviving son, who not only grew up in Rivendell with Elrond potentially being something like a foster father for him, but who also was born there, according to Appendix A, became King of Arnor when he turned 21, as explained last section. I can imagine that he congratulated the elven couple or even attended their wedding, though at that time he was around 114 years old, which is not that old for a Dune dying of the royal bloodline. As we learned, Elrond becoming a foster father reflected his own past. He grew up without his father Eärendil and even without his mother Elwing, and he was taken by those, the remaining sons of Feanor, who killed a lot of people he knew growing up in the mouths of Sirion in the third kinslaying. It can be assumed they even tried to kill his mother, who jumped off a cliff to escape the slaughter. Did Elrond know initially that she was saved by the Vala Ulmo, the king of the sea? He also could later see his father when he looked into the sky, seeing the star of Eärendil, which is his father, on his flying ship, carrying one of the legendary gems, one of the Silmarillion, but this was for sure still different from his father being there with him. Interestingly, the name Elrond means star dome. Originally, as described in letter 211, the name means elf cavern because, according to this letter, Elrond and Elros as children were placed in a cave with a waterfall in front of the entrance by the sons of Feanor, or their soldiers. I assume so they would starve there, which is what happened to the two brothers of their mother Elwing as well, just in a forest in the second kinslaying. Both were also still very young, and again the sons of Feanor were responsible for this. In the second kinslaying, Feanor's first son Maedhros repented and started searching but could not find them, and they were never seen again. Letter 211 hints at this terrible deed being repeated during the third kinslaying with Elrond and Elros, it seems, just with a cave. Here, Maglor, Feanor's second son, took pity and I guess rescued them. He became their foster father. They were found in the cave and in this version named like this. Elros was dabbling in the water, which led to the name elf dew or elf spray, it seems. However, Tolkien changed his mind later again. We find this change even in a later letter, and translated Elrond's name with Stardome or Vault of Stars. I also prefer this translation. In this context, we can also read in the Silmarillion, "The ring of sapphire was with Elrond in the fair valley of Rivendell, upon whose house the stars of heaven most brightly shone." In my opinion, he did not grow bitter from these terrible past events and was blessed in a weird way, but could maybe also relate to how it was growing up without a father, and that is probably why he was so hospitable and became a father figure for so many young Dunedain chieftains, as we will learn. And also, he, in a sense, lost his brother Elros too, of course, different from how Valandil lost his brothers. Elros sailed to Numenor and died as a mortal man, while Elrond lived on as elf. I think this influenced the Elf Lord a lot, and maybe he could relate well to the difficult childhood of Isildur's son. Third Age 130, the couple's twin sons, Eladan and Elrohir, were born. Third Age 241, their sister Arwen Undomiel. It's interesting that we see twins again. As mentioned, Elrond and Elros were twins too, according to War of the Jewels. Maybe an expression of the duality of this half-elven line. And now Elrond had his own family and was a father too, and had the luxury of living in a time of peace with his wife and children. I could imagine his family was very important to him and that he tried to make things better compared to his ancestors. Just reflecting on his complex past for sure bore wisdom. After so many big events, the following centuries remained little noteworthy until around Third Age 861. For an elf, this is very little time, but of course for men it was not. Valandil died Third Age 249. We don't know much about it, but Elrond for sure took notice. The king ruled in the north for 239 years, which was quite long and maybe indicates a blessed life. The name Valandil translates to lover of the Valar. The Valar were comparable to high angels, forming a god pantheon in Tolkien's world. Now, after 860 years of peace, I would argue the first bad omen happens that might indicate that the peaceful times would slowly end. Valandil's descendant, I think 8 generations later, Earendur, king of Arnor, dies, and his 3 sons argue over who shall rule the kingdom. Of course, the eldest son Amlais would have the right to rule, but this conflict, or dissension as it's called in Lord of the Rings, leads Arnor to be split into 3 kingdoms, Arthedain, Cardolan and Rhodour. The kingdoms were right between Rivendell and Lindon, and we learned that Elrond and Arnor had a good relationship, not sure if some other princes also grew up in Rivendell in the meantime. It's hard to say what the elves thought about this conflict and splitting Arnor, but I can imagine Elrond and Círdan saw this with worry. It was definitely the first step of weakening Arnor. The decision also is very much in contrast to Elrond not trying to become the next High King of the Noldor elves. Elrond for sure saw this as not wise, maybe also because there were conflicts among the elven clans, and this decision would not have been for the greater good. The 3 sons of the last king of Arnor did not see the greater good, and potentially all of them wanted to rule. At least that is my speculation, and it should lead to their ruin. In Gondor, though, the first ship king, Tarannon Falastur, is ruling and extends the realm of Gondor. He married a black Numenorean woman named Beruthiel, possibly from Umbar for diplomatic reasons it seems. Despite the success of Gondor, we find another bad omen here. The couple did not get along well and had no heir, a first time for a king of Gondor. The next 3 ship kings and the kings after this are from the line of Tarannon's brother. Now, a few centuries after Arnor splitting, around Third Age 1000, huge events start to happen, though they stay hidden for most people. One day somebody arrived in Middle-earth at Mithlond, the Grey Havens. A man that should be known as Curunir, which means man of skill in Sindarin. We know him better as Saruman. A bit later 2 more men arrived at the Grey Havens and were greeted by Círdan, who was one of the few who understood their true nature, and to one of them he gave Narya, the Ring of Power, that he got from Gil-galad. He knew that man would need it more than he did, and that man was called Mithrandir by the elves. We know him as Gandalf. The other man is of course Radagast. I think there is no note how elves call the brown wizard in Sindarin. His Quenya name was Iwendil, which means lover of birds. With those men, the wizards, things would later change a lot in Middle-earth, though at first they were a bit more passive and did a lot of networking, you could say. They were the Istari, Quenya for those who know, Maiar or angels of lower rank in the disguise of old men. They traveled to Middle-earth to help establishing a rebellion against Sauron. See my video about the Istari. Interestingly, we remember how in Mithlond, Gil-galad, Elrond and Círdan looked through Sauron's disguise, at least to some degree, and not let him in. This time it seems Círdan was sure it was not another trick by Sauron and that they were the real ambassadors of the West Continent Aman. Also, we can read an interesting note in the Silmarillion, quote, "None knew at that time whence they were, save Círdan of the Havens, and only to Elrond and to Galadriel did he reveal that they came over the sea." This seems to be an example for how these characters as the wise and powerful of Middle-earth interacted in the background, even if we don't have dialogues and details about this. I assume the 3 met in person and would not discuss these matters through messengers or letters. Another option would be a form of telepathy the elves could use called Osanwe, but that's a complicated topic we might discuss later in one of the last Third Age parts. There are some further assumptions I would make. Círdan met the Istari first, so this is most likely why the other did not know. They also were potentially able to see the power and wisdom of the Istari, especially Galadriel, because she lived in Aman, where the Maya lived, for quite some time as well, in contrast to Círdan and Elrond. I guess Elrond and Galadriel simply had not the opportunity yet to meet the wizards. In addition, it shows how respected Círdan's judgment and message was. If Círdan says they are the real deal coming over the sea, even giving one of them his Ring of Power and foresight, his word and decision would be trusted. Elrond and Galadriel also knew from Círdan that Gandalf now had Narya. This and the knowledge of the 3 Elven Rings of Power in general was kept secret, quote, "But the Red Ring Narya remained hidden until the end, and none save Elrond and Galadriel and Círdan knew to whom it had been committed." And of the 3 rings that the elves had preserved unsullied, no open word was ever spoken among the wise, and few even of the Eldar knew where they were bestowed. We can also read in the Unfinished Tales, "For Círdan saw further and deeper than any other in Middle-earth." Maybe this also hints at Círdan, one of the oldest and wisest elves in Middle-earth, was the one who had a bad feeling with Anatar, who was Sauron in disguise in the Second Age. Tolkien masterfully puts in a lot of nuances here, and he often connects events, mirrors the past, and manages to position characters and events in the story that start a larger plot, so it's at least worth thinking about it, but it's just a thought of mine. As mentioned, the Istari arrived around 3rd Age 1000 to 1100, and it is in this time that Sauron returns to the western part of Middle-earth in secret. We have some hints in Appendix B of The Lord of the Rings, but we interestingly also find a lot of information in some iterations of Appendix B published in Peoples of Middle-earth. Quote, 3rd Age 1050. Hiarmendakil conquers the Harad. Gondor reaches the height of its power. About this time, a shadow falls on Greenwood and men begin to call it Mirkwood. The Periannas, the Hobbits, are first mentioned in records with the coming of the Harfoots to Eriador. We see how two opposing events happen, the rise of Gondor and Sauron returning, hiding in Greenwood the Great, which will become known as Mirkwood due to this, and one record that builds the foundation for a far greater plot, the appearing of the Hobbits who crossed the Misty Mountains. According to peoples of Middle-earth, they probably lived in Greenwood the Great before. We know the Rohirrim knew about the Hobbits from legends, maybe from ancient days, when they were still the Eotheod, the ancestors of the Rohirrim, or even earlier when they had Gothic names, living in the north long before Rohan was even founded. They called them Holbütla, plural Holbütlan, Old English for hole builder, which further seems to be the root of the word hobbit. Quote from Theoden from the chapter The Road to Isengard from The Lord of the Rings. The days are fated to be filled with marvels. Already I have seen many since I left my house, and now, here before my eyes, stand yet another of the folk of legend. Are not these the halflings that some among us call Holbütlan? Considering that very early names of the Norsemen are Gothic, an Old English name could maybe limit how old this word is, or hints at languages coexisting in this region. I think the latter might be more plausible. Hobbits later also have other words from that time in their language, especially in their names, which makes a connection and meeting of those cultures very plausible. It must also be noted that Old English only represents the actual language. The in-world word for Holbütla is Kut Dukan, meaning hole dweller. See Appendix F. Check my video about languages of Tolkien for more information. However, the connection of Hobbitish and the language of the ancestors of the Rohirrim indicates that they were geographically close to each other at some point and even met. I love how Tolkien adds an etymology for the word hobbit with this that fits the world he created perfectly and makes sense in it. And exactly this adds another fascinating detail if we consider that the Hobbits had a huge part in Sauron's final defeat. It seems almost ironic that the Dark Lord entering Greenwood the Great, where the early Hobbits lived, might have forced them to leave and look for new lands. In combination with the War of Angmar much later, where some Hobbits fled back over the Misty Mountains to the area around the Gladden Fields, it becomes even more ironic because that led to Deachol and Smeachol finding the One Ring before Sauron and Saruman could, and altogether led ultimately to Bilbo finding it, bringing it to the Shire. I think this is a mind-blowing detail. What I wonder is how the Hobbits crossed the Misty Mountains, through Khazad-dûm, through Rivendell, Redhorn Pass, or the Gap of Rohan or Kalinarthon, as this area was still called at this time. We don't know, but there are not that many options. In case of Rivendell, they might have met Elrond. Appendix B uses the phrase "are first mentioned in records." Rivendell is for sure one of the places that could have written records like these. In Appendix B of The Lord of the Rings, it is mentioned that the Sturs, one of the three Hobbit tribes, crossed the mountains over the Redhorn Pass, but we don't know it for the other two tribes. In The Hobbit, Bilbo asks even where Rivendell is, and he was probably among the more educated Hobbits, so that seems at least a bit odd if this was the case, though we also know the Hobbits. Of course, it could also just be a device Tolkien used to explain it to the reader, or long-lost knowledge. In addition, Bilbo started learning a lot after his adventure and recorded it, which probably has not been done before. In addition, it would make sense for Thranduil in this time to move further north, as mentioned in some texts, and build his halls, but this could have happened earlier too. Even for Orofer in the Second Age, it is mentioned in the Unfinished Tales that he moved northward 3 times. As a result, I found it very difficult to construct a consistent chronology here. I think the elves of the Woodland realm lived a bit isolated too, but of course they knew very well what was going on in their woods. Remember them sending help against the orcs for Isildur. There is no hint though if they ever visited Rivendell except for Legolas, not even for Elrond visiting them and how their diplomatic relationship looked like. The only potential meeting might be during the mentioned investigation of the disaster of the Gladden Fields and them sending help or as part of the army of the Last Alliance. Maybe they exchanged message or were somewhat connected through Gandalf after 3rd Age 1000. In addition, Thranduil was, for example, not mentioned as member of the White Council. We come to that later. Though we also don't know all members, because the Silmarillion mentions among the core members Galadriel, Elrond, Círdan, Saruman and Gandalf, other lords of the Eldar. If we return to the Istari, we find hints that they did some networking. This for sure included Thranduil. Radagast became friends with beasts and birds, I assume the great eagles too. According to some sources, Saruman mostly walked among men, and about Gandalf we can read in the Silmarillion, Mithrandir was closest in council with Elrond and the elves. He wandered far in the north and west and made never in any land any lasting abode. So in this time Gandalf probably became friends with Elrond, and we know from The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings that Rivendell is a place that Gandalf's paths would often lead to. What they talked with each other in these early days is not mentioned, but I think they often held counsel and respected each other greatly. For example, Gandalf later added some horses and riders formed waves to the flood summoned by Elrond in The Lord of the Rings. This might seem like a minor detail, but in my opinion it indicates a deeper friendship, because messing around like this, especially with one other's magic, is something I see more among friends, if that makes sense. In this case, as a corporation. Imagine Gandalf messing with Saruman's magic. The White Wizard would not be happy in my opinion. In Mirkwood there were the elves of the Woodland realm, and they probably noticed quite early that something strange is going on there, but that we will discuss next episode. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked part 4 of the Who is Elrond video. Keep in mind, all was originally written to be one video. This part might seem a bit strange and confusing as a result, because it's more of a bridge part that leads to the next section. I couldn't really split it up better here, but I think it still worked out. In the all-in-one version it will work better though, but producing it directly as one video would take a lot of time and destroy me. But I'm quite happy that I could produce this part relatively quick after the last one. For sake of making these video parts work better on YouTube, I decided that from now on I will use thumbnails and titles that fit to the video topic instead of going for yet another Elrond thumbnail. Who is Elrond will still be in the title though. I also changed that for the last one. Hope nobody's confused. This is a result of the poll and feedback I got recently through my community tab post. Thank you again for your help. Also, if you are still listening, feel free to press the like button, leave a comment, I appreciate feedback, and maybe even subscribe. If you want notifications, press the stupid bell. I got quite a bit of feedback that the notifications do not work for many subscribers, which is unfortunate, but no idea how to fix that from my side. I will keep an eye on it, maybe uploading more frequently might help. Also, if you are interested in more Tolkien related content, check my channel or the recommended lore videos playlist linked in the description. Next on the channel is either the next part of the Who is Elrond video, or I have an idea for a shorter video covering a different topic to have some variety. Should I go with the latter, I might have another exciting announcement coming with that video, though it will only be interesting for a quite small group of my viewers, to be honest. Still, for me it would be a very exciting experiment. Beyond that, I also have a gaming related channel and stream on Twitch at times. Elden Ring is still a topic there, though I tried also to mix in some other games. Due to my main channel needing some attention right now, I struggle producing gaming content for the second channel, though the last video I made for it was really successful and I have some ideas for more gaming related content. Should there be any big Tolkien related news, I will also do another YouTube live stream. Again, thank you especially for your support, and goodbye.